Every time somebody attacks Biden on his senility, I feel like that is a stronger indictment of Trump's own failure as a president. I do agree that Biden definitely seems to have slowed down in his older age, but I mean, he passed so much more legislation than Trump. I think our foreign policy aims are better than they were under Trump. And I think the way that he manages the rhetoric and the overall attitude of the country is way more responsible than Trump as well. And he's not facing 90 plus criminal indictments. So
That
I think all Democrats can kind of hope for is that the perception of the economy continues to increase. Consumer sentiment is starting to climb again.
Are
I think that
negatives
Trump
allowed?
is also
Yeah,
stumbling into
I'm trying to think of a number past negative infinite.
We're here in Nashville, Tennessee, talking to people about Joe Biden. Scale of 1 to 10. How's he doing? What has he done? Can you think of anything? Let's find out. 0. Why?
0. I think he doesn't know anything he's talking about.
-1.
I'd be 10 in the minus numbers.
Charisma. I like him because he has charisma. I also like him because when Donald Trump was my president, the economy was doing well. We ended endless wars. We started no new wars. There was relatively peace around the world with Donald Trump at the helm of the United States of America. People didn't like what he tweeted. People didn't like the way that he spoke. Maybe they didn't like the way that he dressed or the way that his hairstyle was or his fake tan. But none of that mattered because the United States was doing well. Our border was secure. The world was a better place with Donald Trump at the helm. And when Democrats talk about Joe Biden and they say, oh, you know, he's slipping a little bit, my goodness, we know that they are obviously gaslighting us because we can clearly see that Joe Biden is not just slipping. He was slipping in 2020. He has slipped all the way now that we're in 2024. And it's not just little misspeaks here and there. Everybody has misspeaks. They mix people up. For Joe Biden, you have a special counsel report that quite plainly says we can't go after this man for his classified documents because he's a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. That says it all right there. Maybe we can't indict him 96 times. We can't charge him with 96 things because he simply is not cognitively there enough to be able to withstand it. That's the leader of the United States. That's the best the Democrats can do for their party. I'm sorry. You guys better be shaking in your boots if that's what you're going to go with in November.
I mean, Destiny, you know, I know your view of Trump, but it's hard to argue with all of what Tomi just said, isn't it? I mean, the Democrats seem to me to be sleepwalking in to a complete disaster if they're not careful. Biden does look, from here across the pond anyway, like someone who can barely string a sentence together or stay on his own 2 feet. How would anyone vote for someone given they have to do 4 years more from November as President of the United States, the toughest job in the world?
I mean, it depends on what you're pushing for. I mean, if you want to elect a comedian because he's got good charisma, then I agree that Trump definitely has better stage presence than Biden does. I think if you're a Democrat, you want to support Biden, you just have to try to stick in the realm of fact. Republicans inhabit a totally separate world right now. I just heard Tomi Lahren say that we're doing better on the foreign policy front because Trump was better for being in endless wars. I mean, he bombed Syria. He abandoned Kurdish allies. He kicked the can down the road in Afghanistan. He hid Yemen drone strikes from us. He was still part of the Saudi-led coalition to bomb Yemen. He didn't do anything about Russia's takeover of Crimea. I mean, like, the idea that Trump was better on any of these areas of foreign policy is ridiculous. The idea that he was better domestically when he completely mishandled
Obama, by the way. That was
Obama's
Obama,
not my
my friend.
That's great. But Trump still didn't do anything about it. Even if you think that Trump does have good ideas for the country, he has just failed as a leader. He's a failure of a businessman. He's a failure of a leader. He can't get people together to write legislation. Joe Biden, in all his senility, was somehow able to pass the same infrastructure bill that Donald Trump said for 4 years he was going to get done. He didn't. Donald Trump couldn't even repeal and replace Obamacare, which is what a lot of Republicans literally voted him to do. Like, the idea that Trump is a competent leader is anything more than just a comedian or a guy that does funny one-liners on Twitter is delusional.
I mean, you can blame him for many things, but as Tomi said, you can't blame him for the takeover of Crimea because that was years before Trump came into power.
No, I'm not blaming him for the takeover of Crimea. I'm saying that Trump has never made a good but difficult foreign policy decision. If you look at the Doha agreement that he made with the Taliban, he kicked the can down the road. He says that he would be strong on Ukraine. The only thing he cared about for Ukraine was trying to get information about Hunter Biden.
What about what Joe Biden did in Afghanistan, which was the most shameful and disgraceful overnight fleeing of a country and throwing millions of Afghan women back to the Taliban walls? Now, you can blame Trump all you like for that, but the bottom line is it happened under Joe Biden on his watch. He was president. It was a catastrophic failure, that evacuation. So many allies and friends of the Americans were left in its wake. Many people died that day. And women in Afghanistan have gone back to the medieval dark ages. That's on Joe Biden, isn't it?
No. If you
Really?
read the if you read the special inspector general report for Afghanistan, the whole reason why that pullout happened on that timetable because it was because of the Doha agreements that Donald Trump signed. He drew our troop levels down to historic lows in Afghanistan for when Biden came into office because Donald Trump put America on a timetable to leave that country. If Biden wanted to, he could have come in and undone that.
So just to be clear though, Destiny, you're blaming
Yeah.
Donald Trump for a decision that was taken 8 months after he left office.
That decision was taken under Donald Trump. The timetable was established under Donald Trump.
He
It's
didn't
called
have
the
to stick
Doha
to it.
Agreement.
Joe Biden's a big boy. He's the president of the United States. I mean, Tommy, it seems to me that the desperate attempts...
Is he a big boy, Piers? Is he a big boy? I'm not so sure. He has to use the kiddie stairs, but I just have to jump in here because I don't think anybody wanted to stay in Afghanistan. That wasn't the point. The timetable that Donald Trump negotiated, there was nothing wrong with the timetable. Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan was catastrophic. He didn't have the support that he needed. He didn't have the strategy that he needed. It wasn't about staying in Afghanistan in perpetuity. Nobody wanted that. I'm sure Democrats didn't want to be in an endless war in Afghanistan either. It was the way that Biden handled it. And every time since then, he has failed when it comes to foreign policy. Now we've got Israel at war. We've got Ukraine still and heading into year, 2.5 of war that we are still funding. The world is a much more dangerous place. And that doesn't even bring me to my southern border where we have 10 million illegal immigrants who have invaded on Biden's watch. I'm sure my friend is going to tell me that that is Donald Trump's fault as well, even though he oversaw the most secure border that we believe in American history that we know of. So there is no disputing the record. You can say that Joe Biden was able to sit there as a shadow president while things got passed through Democrat chambers, but you can't sit here and tell me that the man is cognitively well or that he's done anything on his own accord to better the world of the United States.
Well, let me ask Destiny.
My friend, you know this.
Let me ask Destiny my favourite question of all my liberal friends, which is, do you know how many illegal immigrants Barack Obama deported in 8 years?
How many illegal immigrants did he deport, or did they have contact
Did he have
border?
deported, thrown out of the country?
I don't know the number of that.
Have a guess.
For when you say deport, you mean somebody that was already in the country, and then they were caught
removed.
in the country and removed. My guess is those numbers are always fairly low. Probably less than 1 million. I have no idea. I truly have no idea.
3 million, which is the greatest number pro rata of any president in history, and earned him the moniker in Mexico of deporter in chief. And yet, oddly, whenever I talk to my liberal friends, they never know this. They never made a fuss at the time. They were quite comfortable about that happening. And I look at what's going on the southern border now. Apparently, Biden's going down the same day as Trump on Thursday, which will be fascinating. But he hasn't been there I don't think he may have been once before in his time as president, which is insane, given how obviously problematic the southern border has become. Whichever side of the political divide you're on, would you accept that?
Would I accept that the border is a problem?
Well, not only a massive problem, but that President Biden, to date, in his tenure, has done absolutely nothing but make it worse.
I don't know about absolutely nothing but make it worse. I think one of the issues right now is Republicans are holding up funding to actually apportion more money to border security. I think that there are definitely border problems that exist right now that definitely need attention. But I think comparing it to Donald Trump, when he was able to utilize the emergency of COVID and the fact that the immigration numbers were at historic lows over the COVID period, and then to say that, well, look, he did a way better job than Biden did, where once COVID ends and then everything starts to open up again, you see a huge surge of immigrants, isn't the most fair comparison. But obviously, yes, something needs to be done with the border, of course. And I hope that Republicans approve funding in Congress for something to actually be done.
Well, Tommy, that's an interesting point where I would be critical, I think, of your position on this, because I absolutely believe that Ukraine has got to be helped to defeat Putin, or at least hold him off, because the alternative for the West, it seems to me, is extremely dangerous and alarming, which is that Vladimir Putin seizes large chunks of a sovereign democratic country and is allowed to keep it. And the idea that won't embolden him to just go and do the same elsewhere, I think is for the birds. I also think it's for the birds that China, looking at this, won't then immediately think about invading and taking back Taiwan.
Well, I would also say this. If Donald Trump were our president right now, Putin would have never done that because he didn't when Donald Trump was in office. We mentioned earlier under Obama, they go in, take Crimea. Under Biden, go in and try to take Ukraine. So Donald Trump, we'll just say, he started no new wars. And the world was either respectful of Donald Trump or fearful, doesn't matter which. I would also say this. We don't, on my side, when I talk about not funding Ukraine anymore, it's not because we want Putin to take Ukraine. It's because we understand that here in the United States of America, we have more problems that we have to attend to. We've got homeless veterans. We've got a border invasion of our own. So the thought of sending more money, more weapons to Ukraine.
I keep hearing this, but I find it really odd to hear any American conservatives almost saying Putin should be allowed to just take what he's taken. That would never have happened 20 years ago in American political discourse. So there's been a massive sea change in conservative mentality to how to deal with a Russian dictator. But secondly, on the wider point about Ukraine, surely it comes down to this. If we applied the same mentality to Adolf Hitler in World War II, we'd all be likely speaking German. Why are we so weak about standing up to him in Ukraine? It's the same as when Hitler invaded Poland.
Piers, it's not the same because Ukraine is a corrupt country. So we also have to deal with that. There are many Americans that you'll talk to that initially supported aiding and assisting Ukraine. And then as we sent more and more money, and as the Pentagon couldn't account for $1 billion in weapons, and as we're not really sure where the accounting is going for this, we have a lot of concerns, as we should, because we're sending our hard-earned tax dollars to a corrupt country.
Why can't you help
that
Ukraine?
Russia's corrupt, but guess what's the number two?
Right.
Ukraine.
But why can't you help Ukraine and fix the southern border? Why does it have to be one or the other? America has the money to do this. It has the military firepower to help Ukraine. And it also has the ability, if it really focuses, to sort the southern border out. I don't understand this argument. America can't do two things at once. It's the number one superpower in the world, isn't it? I mean,
well, it would be nice if we could do two things at once. With a stroke of a pen, President Biden could help solve the border crisis. He is not going to do that. It's not a matter of can you, it's a matter of are our leaders able to, and unfortunately they're not. But when you look at Ukraine, which is a corrupt country, and we're sending our tax dollars over there for now going on over 2 years, it's problematic for a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans don't know where our money is going. We don't know how it's being accounted for. We don't trust our government or theirs to tell us where it's going. So that's where the problem lies.
Okay, let me bring in.
And we also believe if we really want to squeeze Putin and we want to squeeze Russia. But Piers, I want to say this. We should be focusing also on American energy independence, because when you have strong American energy independence, that's another way
but
that
America broadly has America has broadly more energy independence than most countries in the world. So that's not a big problem. Your independence for energy is very strong compared to most European countries. What do you think, Jess? I mean, there is an argument to say that Trump's erratic, unpredictable style on the global stage did make people think twice. I mean, not much of any serious gravity happened on his watch. He did not, as Tomi says, he didn't launch a new war anywhere. Is there some merit to the madness, if you like?
No. People seem to want to give Trump credit for some things, like people not starting wars or people not engaging in certain types of, I guess, international armed conflict decisions. But the reality is that if you analyze any of the actual particular things that he did when it came to foreign policy, most of them were the precursors for the conflict that we are now blaming on Biden. For instance, I brought up before the round of Doha talks that happened between the Taliban and the United States. The Afghanistan government wasn't even included in those talks. If you look at what's happening right now in Israel and Palestine, the whole Abraham Accords, where Donald Trump was heralded as having peace in the Middle East, the whole reason that was done in a way was to avoid Israel annexing the West Bank and to undermine the Palestinians there that wanted to negotiate with Israel for peace. The whole Abraham Accords completely cut them out of the conversation. It's one of the reasons why Hamas felt so slighted. It's one of the reasons why Palestinians are engaging in more violent activity against Israel, is because nobody's ever been negotiating with them. So there's like this very superficial view that you can take where you can say, oh, Donald Trump was good for foreign policy because no new wars happened to start under this 4-year time period. But if you look at what he was actually setting up in any of the countries where the conflict was going on, all he was doing was setting the stage to kick the can down the road for future conflict to erupt, which it has.
All right, Destiny, what would you give Trump credit for?
What domestically or internationally?
Anything. Give him some credit for something.
let's see, if I had to give Trump credit for anything, I mean, our economy was strong under Trump. I do think sometimes that Democrats are too heavy-handed when it comes to things related to welfare or things related to taxation. I don't like the idea of demonizing success. I think that Republicans typically do a better job, or did do a better job, at things like patriotism or championing wealth or people that were making money. So I guess I would give Trump, general credit for things like that. I mean, I saved money on my taxes.
And Tomi, just to return the favor, can you think of something good to say about Joe Biden?
When I look at my country right now, there's not a whole lot that I could say about Joe Biden. I think he seems like a nice man. He seems like perhaps a good husband, perhaps a good father, supporting, obviously, Hunter Biden. So he seems like he is, I'll use the words of the special counsel, a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. I don't think he's a bad person. I think that he's uniquely bad at this job. And I think it's time for someone to come and make America great again. And that's
I have
the
to
most
say,
we're gonna
I
get
think
out of
destiny
Piers.
wins.
In one of the most exploding economies in the history of the United States and the recovery from COVID, and there's not, in all of the foreign policy guidance we have related to Ukraine and Israel, there's not a single positive thing that we can say about Biden's presidency right now.